voice recorder going.
Oh yeah, me
There's my
too.
broadcast.
Oh, it's so annoying that they've updated the name of voice recorder. I typed voice
Oh,
every
yeah.
time, and now it's sound. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. We'll be starting in just a second. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing
Starting
here
in just a
too.
second.
Clapping.
Testing 1, 2, 3. That sounds right. Okay.
Let me put this down.
Are you guys ready to talk about build? We won't be talking about all of build, just the Windows part. If you were tuning in to listen to Azure News, this is the wrong podcast.
Okay, let's see. That's that. Let me bring up the intro. Oh, I didn't need to grab that. I should set out, switch my account.
Excuse me. My lights aren't right.
All right, tweet is sent out. Minimize that. Okay, I am now recording.
I am now recording as well.
In 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 271 for May 27th, 2022. Hey everyone, Deanna Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast, where we talk all things Microsoft, Surface, Xbox, PC, and any other cool tech stuff that has happened during the week. And, well, we got quite a bit of stuff to talk about this time. Of course, we'll update you guys on what's going on with Windows 11, specifically the insider channels and new features and new releases that have been coming out, as well as any future plans or notes around that. Also, Microsoft Build happened this week, and although it is mostly focused, of course, for developers, which is outside of our pay grade here, we will cover some of the news because there was some really interesting stuff, including Project Volterra, which not only has a cool name and is technically a Surface device. They're not calling it a Surface device, but it has kind of the Surface logo on it. But what makes it interesting is it's an ARM-based PC, desktop PC, we should say. It is aimed at developers, but we'll take a look at it, talk about it, what it's for, why it exists, and why is Microsoft doing it? Why in the first place? There's also some news around OneNote, which has had a very interesting dual existence. There's a UWP version and a Win32 version, and apparently that is going to be rectified pretty soon as Microsoft continues to remove redundancy wherever it can. So we'll talk about what's coming to OneNote. Also, our own Jez Corden broke a story regarding Microsoft's progress on a streaming device for Xbox. And what's interesting about this story is Microsoft actually confirmed the information for the first time. They don't do that for Zach and I when it comes to Surface stuff. But when it comes to Xbox, they will actually give, apparently, nothing, well, we'll talk about it. Stuff is happening. Also, Insider, aka Business Insider, is back with another explosive story talking about bad behavior with Microsoft executives, specifically the Golden Boys, people who've been around for a long time, who also tend to bring in a lot of money for the company, who also allegedly and reportedly get away with inappropriate behavior at work. And then we'll talk about the thing of the week and anything else that comes up. And for those of you who like humor and Dan's thoughts on body stuff, Manscaped is luckily sponsoring this podcast again, and I'm actually very excited about that. This is funny. This is what I get excited about. Because actually, I don't mind shilling for a company if I really like their products, and I really like their products. And so I have a fun time talking about it, and we'll talk about some new stuff that they sent me this week and what it all means and how you can get it. And if you don't care, it'll be a funny section at least to break up the what has been a pretty depressing week outside of technology. Our thoughts go out to people in Texas, obviously. We don't want to dwell on this too much, but obviously living in America is always a challenge with everything that goes on there. And, hopefully people are doing well. But let's get to, I guess, some brighter news, Zach. What's going on with Windows 11 and what happened this week?
So yeah, Windows 11. Primarily, most of the news we're going to talk about around Windows 11 today came out of Build, and that's sort of the area we'll be focusing on because Build is a massive event, as Dan mentioned, primarily aimed at developers. Me and Dan certainly aren't developers, and while we do try and keep on top of that news, we're certainly not the people that should be telling you about developer news. So we're going to focus primarily on the more approachable news, I guess is the words to say, around the Windows stuff. Because although there wasn't any direct news about Windows 11 specifically, a lot of the news that came out of Build affects Windows 11 users, whether you're a developer or even a consumer that uses Windows. So that's what we're going to talk about here. And where better to start than with the widgets panel. Microsoft, this is an interesting announcement because Microsoft actually told press last year in June when they announced Windows 11 initially that the widgets panel would eventually be able to run third-party widgets. It would support extensibility. It would support the ability to run widgets by developers that aren't Microsoft. However, they never formally announced that to the public. It wasn't in the keynotes. It wasn't in any of the blog posts. It was just something that they told press. And so we've been saying for a while now that yes, the widgets panel will eventually be able to run third-party widgets. But this week at Build, Microsoft officially confirmed that yes, that is happening. And starting later this year, developers will be able to bundle their Win32 or PWA apps with widgets that can be housed in the widgets panel and added by the user if they want. So that's pretty exciting. So if you're somebody who actually does use the widgets panel, it's about to get a lot more interesting in the coming months because you will finally be able to see widgets from, say, Spotify or Facebook or whoever, because as I mentioned, it works with both Win32 and PWA. So Facebook has a PWA, I think. So they could totally build a widget and have it in the widgets panel, which would be really nice. Interestingly, they didn't mention UWP, so I guess UWP's been kicked out of the widgets support here. I don't know what the story is around UWP and supporting widgets, but if PWA can do it, surely UWP can. I don't know. Regardless, that is really interesting. They didn't announce any new features for the widgets panel specifically. We're still waiting for things like the full screen widgets panel. That will be really interesting and quite useful, I think, once third-party widgets come about, because then essentially the widgets panel, if you can full screen it, becomes a sort of Windows 8 start screen replacement, right? I think that a lot of tablet users are kind of hoping for that to happen. So I guess we'll wait and see regarding that. What else happened with Windows 11? The Microsoft Store. The Microsoft Store got a lot of focus at Build this year, which is refreshing, I think, because, previous years the Microsoft Store has been sort of quite down. Not many people talking about it. It was seen as a failure, I think, for a lot of people. But this year, that has changed. Ever since Microsoft opened up the Microsoft Store to unpackaged Win32 programs, the Microsoft Store has come to life. Microsoft says that they've seen a 50% uptick in apps being submitted to the Microsoft Store since last year, including things like Audacity, OpenOffice, Firefox, and Adobe Express. These are some big names. These aren't small, indie developers, although that's great that they're coming too. But big names are finally paying attention to the Microsoft Store, and it really is becoming this one-stop shop for all Windows apps across the web, regardless of if it's an unpackaged Win32 or a UWP or a PWA. They're all welcome, or in this, even Android apps, right? They're all welcome in the Microsoft Store, and it appears to be working. Microsoft does appear to be building a storefront that is looking to be more successful than their previous efforts on Windows 10 and Windows 8. So that's really good to see. But the big news specifically around the store itself, for end users at least, is that they are introducing, at some point, there was no ETA for this, but they announced that they're going to be bringing a cross-device restore apps feature finally to the Microsoft Store. So what this will do is, you boot up a new PC, you hit the desktop, you go to the Microsoft Store, you go to your My Library page. At the top, there'll be a bar and a button that says, hey, we can see you were using another PC recently. Here's all the apps that were on there. Would you like to restore them all onto this device? You click that button and all of those apps will automatically start downloading and installing. That's awesome. That's a feature that I feel like people have been asking for a very long time, and it's finally coming to Windows 11. Again, no ETA for that. Dan, as a reviewer, you go through lots of PCs, right? Surely this feature is going to be a godsend for you.
Yeah, I mean, and the other stuff is good too. We talk about the store and the momentum there and everything that's happening. So, This was good news. I want to touch a bit upon the widget stuff. I know the
Okay.
widget stuff is controversial.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm fine with it. I actually, what makes the widgets weird right now, of course, is they're only semi-useful. Like I like the
Yeah.
weather. The OneDrive thing is cool. We can see your photos from the past. I think is kind of a good usage of it. But it's not like a ton of stuff, right? The entertainment widgets kind of like meh. But this idea of opening up to third party, something we've expected, I think makes it way more interesting. Also, the idea that when you install an app or if an app gets a widget, it automatically basically pops in there. So it takes the thinking out of it. I don't think we need to worry about there being too many widgets suddenly like
Yeah.
showing up in your device. It's probably going to be like Spotify, Facebook.
Yeah.
I like to see Twitter. Maybe Telegram, maybe WhatsApp. WhatsApp's been, although WhatsApp I don't think could because they're a UWP app now, so I'm not really
Yeah.
sure. But some services like that I think would be very, very useful in there and make the widget system just much more useful. If it bothers you, just don't use widgets, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can unclick it and make it disappear from your taskbar, and it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't have a problem with performance of the widgets so far. I use them on laptops, I use them on desktop, and it's been fine. I'm not really too concerned about it. We'll see what happens though. But these adaptive cards are supposed to be pretty efficient. I don't see what's so crazy about it. You know, Android and for people who are just against widgets in general, Android and iOS both have widget systems in place. It's a very familiar type experience these days to have on a computing device. So I don't find it out of place. I do find the distinction that Kevin Gallo, in a video that we embedded in the article, he talked about they are exploring putting widgets in other places. And the word there is explore. They're thinking about things. And we did see the search bar on the desktop. We talked about that last week, of course, as one example of that. But I kind of think widgets on the desktop is an interesting thing. Yeah, it's a throwback to old systems we've had before with Windows. What's old is new again. But
Yeah.
I still find it kind of an interesting thing because it's all about delivery of information. You want information on your computer with the least effort. Microsoft's always been kind of into this. It was peaked with Windows Phone, right? And Windows 8, this glance and go kind of concept. So I think it's an interesting thing that they're exploring at least, right? And not all this stuff is going to be make it into the final builds, but I think it's kind of interesting what they're doing with the widgets. And
Yeah.
listen, if they add third-party support, it's going to really test, I think, how useful widgets can be for people. So we'll
Yeah.
see how they use them.
The biggest issue I had with the widgets panel originally was that it was a web-based sort of thing, right? It had web interface, the widgets
Yeah.
were web-based, and I wasn't a huge fan of that, but I sort of get why they've gone that route now. It's because it's easier for third-party developers
Yes.
to build using web tech over something proprietary that Microsoft is introducing. If it was proprietary, there's no way developers would
Right.
adopt this. Because it's web tech, I think they're more likely to. There's no guarantee that this will be successful still, Whether Spotify decides to build a widget for the widgets panel will remain to be seen, but it will be easier for them to do so if they do decide to do that because it is a web-based technology. So that's pretty cool. Moving back to the Microsoft Store real quick. Microsoft has also announced that they're going to do better work at sort of surfacing App Store listings in other areas of the OS, specifically the search panel, right? So if you search for Spotify in Windows Search, instead of the first result being the spotify.com/download page where you download the client, the top result will be the Microsoft Store listing. And what they're really trying to do is sort of put the Microsoft Store in front of the end user. So, because remember, a lot of these apps will still pull from the developer's preferred source, whether that be on their own website or hosted on the Microsoft Store itself. So it doesn't really matter what button the end user presses as long as it's a trusted source, whether that be the Microsoft Store or the developer's home websites. And Microsoft is, of course, wanting its Microsoft Store to be the forefront of that. So that's what they're going to start doing, which is really nice. Announcement specifically for developers is that they are introducing a few new things here that will make it easier for developers to update their apps as well as sort of control who can and can't see the apps in the Microsoft Store. So I'll just list these off here. The ability to automate store submissions using the new GitHub Action or REST APIs. Developers will be able to automate and manage app submissions directly from their CI or CD build pipeline. which apparently Microsoft Power Toys is already using, so that's really nice. Developers will also be able to make their Win32 apps undiscoverable, which is great for developers who want to sort of test a new version of an app or a new app entirely with a small group of people before going live. Developers will also be able to access new analytic dashboards to get more insights about their Win32 apps, to understand their user acquisition funnel, app usage, health metrics, and install success analytics. And developers will now be able to engage with and respond to reviews on Win32 apps. Previously, that wasn't possible. That was only reserved for apps that were hosted in the Microsoft Store. But now developers who have apps that are hosted outside the store will be able to engage in reviews on the storefront as well, which is really nice. Microsoft also announced a new ad platform for developers. And when we talk about ads is usually talked about in a negative connotation, but this is actually really helpful for developers because this will work in the exact same way sponsored spots do in the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. If you ever search for, say, Twitter, and it's in the App Store app, and then the top result isn't Twitter, it's like Facebook or something else. That's a sponsored ad spot. And now that's coming to the Microsoft Store as well. So you could search for an app, and if you're a developer who wants that app to be at the top of a search results, you can pay Microsoft and get that app up the very top. So that's going to be good for indie developers looking for more exposure for certain search terms. Of course, hopefully you can't abuse the system. You can't try and sort of steal the top spot in certain search terms if your app doesn't belong there. But this is still really nice for developers who are looking to use that legitimately. And that's basically all the news around the Microsoft Store. Lots of changes coming to the Microsoft Store, all pretty good for both developers and end users. Remember, the more apps in the Microsoft Store, whether they be unpackaged or packaged, the better the experience will be for end users. The worst thing for an end user is to open that Microsoft Store, search for an app and not find it, because that discourages them from using it further for other apps, right? I think Chrome's still the biggest one. I think a lot of people still open Chrome, look for Google, open the store, look for Chrome, and don't find it, which is a real shame. And I think Google will forever not be in the store for that reason. But for other apps, it is working, and it's doing, I think, pretty well. And Microsoft should be proud of themselves for sort of essentially letting go of their old vision for the Microsoft Store, which was, they looked at it as a pipeline for making money. They don't do that anymore. That's no longer how they look at the Microsoft Store, which I think is benefiting them quite a lot.
Yeah, it's just that they're just focusing on user experience.
Yeah,
it's just like
yeah,
you go to the store, you type in the app you're looking for, and it should show up there. I mean, I did have someone complain, like, Microsoft Office is still not in the store itself, or Office 3 or Microsoft 365, and well, actually, is Microsoft 365 in there?
It's listed in there, yeah, it is, but it pulls it again. It's hosted outside the store, and it just pulls the installer through the Microsoft Store UI.
And I think, that stuff will be addressed. And I told this person, I'm like, look, I mean, you're not wrong, but the store is still technically new. We've been talking about it for a long time, but technically the Windows 11 store launched in October.
Yeah.
And even then, it was a kind of a slow rollout. A lot of people didn't get Windows 11 until, earlier this year. So it's still a new thing. And we should point out, I mean, Microsoft Teams didn't show up until about, 10 days ago in the
right.
Microsoft store.
Yeah.
So they're clearly getting there. It's just not as quickly as some people will want, but it's not because I don't think they don't want to do this stuff. They're just getting around to it. And we don't know all the moving parts behind the scenes there, but my bet is eventually they're going to get the, all the Office stuff in there too and have everything in that store.
Yeah.
So I think it's been interesting. It's a way better experience than it was a couple years ago. It looks better. I mean, every time you open it, it's updated and refreshed. If you open it up today, they're blasting the Obi-Wan show for Disney Plus, which itself is an app in there. And what's cool, and I believe, when you click it, let's see, it should do the whole. And they do Stranger Things 4. Yeah, that's coming up. But they tell you like where to watch and all that kind of stuff. So it's getting to be much smarter. So I kind of really like it.
Yeah. So the last bit of sort of Windows 11 news coming out of build that I want to touch on here is around Android app support. Obviously, that's still in preview at this time, and that hasn't changed. But what they have announced is that they will finally be expanding support for Android apps via the Amazon App Store on Windows 11 to 5 more markets by the end of this year. This is disappointing news for me, really. Only 5 markets by the end of this year, which means that not now. This still hasn't rolled out to more markets yet. Is disappointing. I don't really understand why this rollout's taking so long. But yes, they have said it will, by the end of this year, it'll be available in 5 more markets, including the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, and Japan. Really, I can only assume that the reason why this is taking so long is because it's more on Amazon's side. The Amazon App Store itself is region locked to the US right now, and I'm guessing Amazon has reasons or issues right now with rolling out to more markets, and I guess Microsoft is working with them to sort that out. But as of right now, it's still US only. And this obviously comes on the heels of the big update to the subsystem that came out in the dev channel last week, which updated the whole thing to Android 12L and introduced a whole bunch of other things, which we talked about in last week's episode. So that is basically the sort of big Windows 11 news coming out of Build. I'm pretty excited.
I just want to say the Android stuff, I only found it interesting because up until this point, we've heard zero about other markets.
Yeah.
Like, there was literally a question like, will it ever come to any other market? Because Microsoft really has not explained its bigger vision and goals behind this feature, being able to run Android apps, directly into Windows. Like, we don't know how Android 12L will affect this, although it's basically updated now to Android 12.1. I still haven't tried it yet. I still got to try the new version. We don't know how they envision these apps living side by side on Windows. We don't know what's the current work and vision for integrating them deeper into the OS, because it looks like, especially with the last update to this system, that they want to do that. They want to integrate this stuff more into Windows. And we don't know now, 5 new markets. I'm actually kind of happy about that because that's better than 1 market. You're right to be disappointed that it's not more markets, but again, that's another question, right? Like, what is the goal for the eventual markets for this? Is it going to be everywhere where Windows is available, everywhere where the Amazon store is available? We just don't know yet. Are they still working on a deal with maybe Samsung to get Samsung store and let's get the Galaxy apps? Like, there's just a lot we don't know about all of this, despite it being, already here technically. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting. We'll see if they ever talk about it more.
Yeah, I guess the last sort of bit of news that I guess kind of relates to Windows 11 is Microsoft announced a new cloud PC service for developers that they call DevBox, and this will allow developers to spin up sort of, development workstations in the cloud and access them from anywhere, just like Windows 365. In fact, it's based on the Windows 365 service. And this will be great for developers who are working for sort of large companies, maybe on contract to build an app for their frontline workers or whatever it may be. And they may not have the PCs or computers necessary to sort of get that work done. So they can, spin up a dev box in their Windows 365 service, hand that off to the contractor or the developer who they've hired, and they can get to work using that, which is pretty cool. Moving on to Windows on ARM, because Windows on ARM was actually a huge focus at Build this year, to everybody's surprise.
Yeah.
But maybe not, because, if you follow us on Windows Central and listen to the podcast every week, we've been hinting for a while now that Windows on ARM would have a bit of a face here at Build 2022. And we were right. And that starts with actual hardware. Microsoft, for the first time since, I want to say, maybe, they've announced new hardware at Build. This comes in the form of a developer kit called Project Volterra, and this is a Windows on ARM sort of Mac mini sized and shaped desktop PC, and it's designed to allow developers to compile for Windows on ARM. But not only that, it's designed to allow them to take advantage of AI capabilities thanks to a built-in neural processing unit, which Microsoft actually announced at the Windows event last month, back in April. They talked about NPUs and how those chips will allow for things like voice clarity, background blur, eye correction, and a number of other things. This developer kit will have that built into the system on a chip, I believe, or it'll be somewhere in the device, and developers can harness that power. And the good thing about it is that the point of these NPUs is that it moves the processing power required for those AI capabilities off the main CPU and onto a dedicated chip, freeing up the CPU to actually focus on other things like launching apps and running the rest of the program without any delays or stutters or performance issues, which is going to be a huge benefit for Windows on ARM, which has sort of struggled with performance in the past. The chips are getting better, and we believe this dev kit will be powered by a Snapdragon 8cx Gen 3. Microsoft hasn't confirmed that, but we do believe it will be a flagship Qualcomm processor. And this is really exciting. Dan, what are your thoughts on the dev kit? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head that there's something about the Snapdragon 8CX Gen 3, which we've talked about for a while now. Now, we don't know that's what's in this
Right.
device. Microsoft wouldn't confirm the chip. It, it's that chip. It
Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
be. It's not Nuvia. We know it's not that. Um, and we know that because they were supposed to give these out to developers at this event. They were
Yes.
supposed to be like available to them at this time. But we also know there's issues in China now with COVID and factories and still logistics supplies. And we haven't even seen any 8CX Gen 3 laptop ship. Specifically, it's going to be the ThinkPad X13S. It's going to be the first one. And so if it was going to ship now, or supposed to ship now, it has to be the ACX Gen 3. Now, Microsoft is probably doing their Microsoft thing where
Yeah.
we put an extra core in and we clocked it a little bit higher. It does have a fan, as far as I could tell from the
Yes.
video itself. So they are probably clocking this much higher to get even more performance out of it. And that's my guess what's actually in there. But there's something about that chip where we are seeing just a lot, like a new kind of jump, right? What I mentioned the Lenovo, this is the first ThinkPad to have an ARM chip in it, and that's not like, oh, let's just put an ARM chip in it. They said we've been working on this for 4 years, and we wanted it to be a certain level of performance and expectations, both in the hardware performance, but also as the software, the support in Windows for the apps that our clients need on a professional level to be there with ARM. And we've reached that point. And now you see Microsoft taking the lead here too, doing this sort of this dev box, which is really interesting. So and they had a few sessions on ARM. They answered a lot of questions about it. Uh, the tooling stuff behind ARM. That's we talked about this also previously, that the issue with converting apps to ARM, Microsoft sold it a couple of years ago. Like on very simplified apps, you could just recompile it
Yeah.
and it'll spit it out as ARM. But on more complicated apps that use multiple libraries and not a single system, it's much more complicated. And so then they introduced a way to do it kind of piecemeal. You can optimize some of your libraries to be ARM and some not. And Windows 11 itself is like that. I believe Office is like that too. And now they're kind of completing the rest of the tooling packages out there for developers to, uh, make their apps more ARM
Yep.
compatible and lessen those burdens. So there really seems to be a change in the tide, I guess, or whatever, with ARM and Microsoft. I don't think this is new. I think it was always planned. But at the same time, it's like we're reaching a new stage. Now, why, does Apple do everything faster? Well, Apple decided to cut off x86 basically and said, we're
Right.
not using that anymore. And so we're going all in on ARM so they can make a clean break with their old systems and not have to worry about it. Microsoft is definitely not doing that. They're very, public about that, saying, no, we're going to support all these systems. And we're basically bringing ARM online with our current systems and keeping those all up to date, but we're not going to favor any system. And that's why it's a slower momentum with ARM. But make no mistake, it's getting there. It's making a lot of progress. And I thought these announcements here at Build, I thought were really interesting for
Yeah.
this stuff.
Yeah, they announced the entire toolchain for developers will be ARM native. So not only can you build apps for ARM, but you can actually build the app on these ARM devices now, right? The complete toolchain will be ARM native. There won't be any emulation or performance issues as a result. So that list includes Visual Studio 2022, Visual Studio Code, Visual C++, modern .NET 6, and Java, classic .NET framework, Windows Terminal, Windows Subsystem for Linux, and the Windows Subsystem for Android. So that's pretty good. They're making inroads, and there was a lot of discussion on Twitter this week about what the point of this dev kit is. Why is Microsoft sort of showing interest in ARM? The story up until now has been Windows and ARM kind of sucks, and it's never really going to gain traction. I think the reason, and people have their different takes. My personal take on this is Windows and ARM is here to stay. It's not going away. This isn't something Microsoft can just kill off and go, right, that was that. We tried. It's the future, this is the future for a lot of sort of computing scenarios and experiences and form factors. OEMs want to have the option to have these to be able to build PCs that are super thin with no fans and stuff, and that's what ARM delivers. Yeah, sure, Windows and ARM isn't at the level of the Apple M1s. It doesn't need to be. at this point, it's getting to a point now, we keep saying this, it's getting to a point where performance is good enough. People who go into a Best Buy or a Microsoft store or wherever to buy a new PC, they can look at an ARM PC and an Intel PC, and for the most part, I don't think they're going to notice much of a difference. And that's only going to get better with the NUVIA chips next year. The HCX Gen 3 is the first chip really where you can say that it doesn't really matter anymore, but the NUVIA chips next year will be where that really changes, and that's going to be a big deal. And yeah, it's not going away, so why not try to make it as good as it possibly can be, right? It doesn't hurt Microsoft to invest in Windows and ARM and just treat it like another party in the Windows PC space. You know, we've got Intel, we've got AMD, we have ARM, and you know, why not make those ARM PCs as good as the experience possibly can be?
Yeah, and this also goes part and parcel with the announcements around NPU and Azure, because their vision, and again, this is stuff we've talked about a lot on this podcast, which is, I think even we talked about it last week, this bifurcation in computing, where you're going to have local discrete processing. You'll have your heavy-hitting GPU, your heavy-hitting Intel 10-core, 12-core, whatever cores you want, processor, 64 gigs of RAM, you know, for the people who need to do like really intensive work on the spot and can't rely on a 5G or Wi-Fi connection. That's still absolutely going to exist. It'll also exist, of course, for gamers who still want that experience. But then there's going to be this other market, the real cutting edge, bleeding edge kind of computation for, especially around enterprise, where they're going to exactly want those exact devices, super thin, long battery life, no fans, but also the good performance. And we're finally starting to get there now where it's, you know, we've talked about the HCX Gen 3, the performance is supposed to be equivalent to that of an 11th Gen Core i5. That's totally fine for light computing use. Like, if you work in Word, you work in the browser, you work in Outlook, and your job is to manage information, an 11th Gen Core i5 is totally awesome. Now, if you can get that in a fanless system that also delivers very long battery life, and you throw in 5G, that's great. What they were announcing here at Build, though, is this vision of a future where you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the cloud, and that's what the Azure computing stuff is with AI and everything. So you're going to do the heavy lifting in the cloud. You'll do some local processing on the thin ARM device and the thin client. And of course, it doesn't need to be ARM, right? I mean, you could do this on any x86 chip as well, where you can put a lot of the heavy processing up in the cloud and have Microsoft's computers do all the rendering and hard work and then stream it down to your device. But ARM devices are going to be the ones that really benefit from this, I think, for the most part. And that's kind of their vision, where you're going to have an NPU, a GPU, and a CPU. And they made this statement about how one of the most important components of a computer in determining how fast your computer is going to be in the future is going to be the NPU in there. And what's interesting about that is Qualcomm has actually done a lot with NPUs. They've been shipping them in their phones for many years right now. They're on, I think, might be Gen 9s or Gen 8s. Like, they're really far advanced. If you know, like, computational photography for, you know, for the cameras on smartphones, that's part of the NPU. All that stuff has been in development for Qualcomm for a while. Intel does some of that too. We've talked about how, especially with 12th Gen, they do a lot of that with the computational photography as well. AMD does it as well, but less so than Intel. But the king of it right now is Qualcomm. They're really investing in NPU. And if you think about it, Surface Pro X had that. They were the first ones to do that eye correction feature when you're using like Skype or any video app, or auto adjust your eyes so you're looking at it looks like you're looking at the camera. Like, that's because of Qualcomm's technology. So this is really interesting because Qualcomm has been investing heavily in that. And now Microsoft is saying that NPU stuff is going to be a major part in computing going forward. So now I'm curious to see what Intel and how AMD are going to kind of respond and ramp up this stuff. But this is going to be the model for going forward for not everyone. I still think in between what I described, those heavy hitting 15-inch gaming laptops or enterprise type workstations and super thin clients running ARM, you will still have an XPS 13, right? Okay. That's just a standard Intel processor, some pretty nice graphics, and it will kind of do both. You'll be able to do photo and video editing and some stuff. You'll be able to leverage things in the cloud, and you'll get a little bit better battery life. But you're going to really start to see the market kind of go in those two directions. And I think that was really kind of interesting about how they talked about this stuff there.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about the device itself. So as I mentioned, it's a sort of mini desktop PC. It's a similar shape and size to a Mac Mini. We don't know the exact dimensions. In fact, we don't really know anything about the device. Microsoft shared very little. But they did show off the box, and they showed off what kind of ports it has. It has 2 USB-C ports on the left side, and it has 3 USB-A ports on the back, alongside an Ethernet jack and a mini display port for visual. Weird that they went with mini display port, but hey, there you go. On the top, it has sort of a Microsoft logo ingrained, and it is interesting that they've called this Project Volterra and sort of really tried to push it as a dev kit. As far as I understand, talking to people internally at Microsoft, this was built by the Surface team. It is through and through a Surface device. It's just not being marketed as a Surface device. Even the sort of unveiling video they had for it was very Surfacey. It was very sort of high budget, lots of visuals, epic music, as if it was a real Surface product. But no, they're not advertising it as such, even though it was built by the Surface team in partnership with Qualcomm. I actually first heard about this last summer. I heard that they were building a Windows and ARM mini PC. At the time, I didn't know it was a dev kit. That sort of came into light a bit later. But yeah, if you go back to January, I wrote a post saying, what to expect this year. And in that post is a paragraph where I say, hey, there is an ARM dev kit coming. And it was built by the Surface team in partnership with Qualcomm, and it's supposed to ship with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. And although they still haven't confirmed the Gen 3 aspect of it, we pretty much nailed all of that, I think. So congrats to us. And as you did mention, Dan, there is a fan in there, so I do think that means they're going to be able to overclock it and squeeze a little bit more power out of it, which is really nice. The external material is recycled ocean plastic, very similar to the ocean plastic mouse that they announced last October. And I think the reason for that is, one, well, it's green, it's better for the world, and two, I think half the point of this dev kit is to try and make the flagship Qualcomm processor as easy to sort of access as possible in regards to price. They don't want to kit this thing out with premium materials and all that stuff to bump up the cost.
Right.
This is a bare bones dev kit, and I think as a result we're going to see this come in at sub $1,000. I hope it will be cheaper than an entry level Surface Pro X. Right? If you think about it, it should be. The Pro X comes with a touchscreen and a high resolution display panel and a keyboard. It doesn't come with a keyboard and trackpad, but other Windows and ARM laptops do, and that bumps up the cost of things. This is a bare bones dev kit. It's a box with a processor and a fan. Everything else is extra, and it doesn't come with a thing. So hopefully it should be less than $1,000. And that would be really nice for developers, right? Because that means they can get access to a flagship Qualcomm processor for cheaper.
That's a good point. If I had to guess, it definitely got to be less than $1,000.
It has to be, right? Yeah.
Because like the Pro X is like $1,000. Actually, you can get it for cheaper now, but that's got a display and
yeah, right, yeah.
The display is really the most expensive part of that device, or at least it's one of the most expensive portions of it. So without that, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like $699 or something.
Yeah. When you consider the 7C dev kits built by those other companies is, I think, less than $300, right? You can get them for quite cheap. And the Snapdragon 7C Samsung laptop is $400 starting. So, and that, again, includes a keyboard trackpad and, a display. And that's usually the majority of the cost if you're paying that much there. So yeah, hopefully this will be it has to be less than the Surface Pro X. I think that's the point of it. Otherwise they just say, go and buy Pro X. It has the chip in it and the NPU stuff you need, so go and use that. But no, this dev kit exists because I think it will bring down the cost of accessing a flagship Qualcomm processor for Windows and ARM, and that's really nice. So that's basically the sort of big news for Build. A brand new developer kit built by the Surface team. No info on pricing or release. As Dan mentioned, they did say that they did sort of want to get it out in time for Build, but because of ongoing world issues, that wasn't able to happen. So we expect it will start shipping sometime later this summer or early fall. Again, no pricing information has been announced, but or market availability. My assumption is it'll be US only at launch and roll out to more markets at a later date, as is usually the case with new hardware that hasn't been announced before. But hey, there you go. That is all of the Build news as far as I'm aware. And now it's time to talk about Manscaped.
Oh, is it? All right. It's my favorite part of the show.
Yeah.
Yes. If you don't know, Manscaped makes stuff for guys. And what I like about them is So they sent me this kit. It's called it's called the Ultra Smooth package, which I was like, okay. And I opened it up, and there's the crop shaver razor, the crop exfoliator, and crop gel. And all three of these are used to shave your most sensitive areas, is how Manscaped is going to word it. For those who want a little bit more, it's for the downstairs area on your body. And what I like about Manscaped, I keep saying this, is like they're purpose driven. So if you wanted to use a razor downstairs before, like me, you take an old razor handle and put a new razor on it for your face. Last I checked, your face and what's downstairs is not the same. And so they actually made a razor that's made for men down there. And then they also throw in the exfoliator, which, yeah, I was a little, okay, we're going to use an exfoliator down there. All right, that's fine. Let's smooth it out. Let's get rid of the dead skin. But it's actually really nice. And then they have a gel, which is basically a shaving cream for down there. But it's a gel, so you can see what you're doing. But this is all to avoid nicks and ingrown hairs, which thank God, like that's never happened to me. But like you definitely want to avoid that down there. Anyways, so this kit, and they do other stuff too. They also sent over their new underwear, which are nice, really nice boxer briefs. By the way, if you're not wearing boxer briefs in 2022, I don't know what you're doing. All right. I remember boxers got big. So let's date myself. In the 80s, everybody wore tighty whities because that was basically it. And then boxers got really big in the 90s. And then like in the 2000s, they were like, let's just combine them and have boxer briefs, which are way more comfortable than either of those. And so Manscaped makes their own too. And they're like, this is why the Manscaped ones are good. And I think I've mentioned this before too. If you're going to buy underwear, and this is for the guys in their 30s and 40s, if you're in your 20s and you're living paycheck to paycheck, I get you're probably going to go to Target and buy 10 pairs of underwear for $10 because that's all you can afford. But if you can, I would say, and if you want to impress other people, maybe get better underwear. But the benefit of having quality underwear is this. Quality underwear doesn't put the seams where your special guys go. And so because I've noticed this on underwear, the cheap stuff does. They just put the seams right there in the middle or where the fly is, and you get a lot of chafing. Good underwear completely avoids that. Manscaped completely avoids that. That's just they have like a secondary net system in there. It's almost like a bathing suit. Way more comfortable. It absorbs sweat, absorbs odor and all that kind of stuff. So again, recommend that stuff. Now, we've also talked about the Lawnmower 4.0, which is their bigger razor. If you just want to remove any general body hair and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I think this stuff is, if you're not doing this stuff, I don't know. I feel bad for your partners. This is just the way we are right now. I know I joke about how bad the 70s must have been because no one in the 70s did any of this. And now it's, we're all doing it. And we're doing it because you should have empathy for your partner. No one wants to see untidy body hair everywhere. Just take the time, the 5 minutes to do it. Now, luckily, we have a discount code here. WCP, the Windows Central Podcast. I'm actually really impressed with this discount. This is 20% off. Usually, whenever I've seen discount codes, it's like 10% off. It's like, okay, 10%. And then they'll like get you for the shipping, right? It just kind of makes up for it. No, this is 20% off. So that Ultra Smooth package, which includes a crop gel, crop exfoliator, it's a big bottle. Like the crop exfoliator is going to last me at least 6 months. They give you 6 replacement blades for the razor. The razor, it comes in a little case so you can keep it in the shower so you won't get it wet and rust and all that kind of stuff. So this kit's going to last you a long time. It's on sale for $34.99, but if you use our discount code, it comes out to $28, which if you think about buying like a Gillette 5-blade razor and buying a refill pack, that's basically that, right? So, and you're getting way more here. This is like a whole kit. Like I said, I wouldn't be necessarily as excited about this. I don't get direct payment, by the way, from Manscaped. So they're not paying me. Someone in a future is getting the money for this sponsorship. I never see it. But I like their stuff, and I'm happy they're sponsoring us because I think the stuff works well, and I like to keep them as a kind of customer because I think they make great things. And if you're a modern guy, you have some disposable income, and you have a partner, or you're trying to get a partner, and you want to keep them happy, I say invest in this stuff. Don't cheap out. I'm telling you, there's a period in your life where you hit your 30s and 40s, and you're like, I need to start buying nice clothes. I need to start buying nice underwear, and take care of myself. Yeah. Zach doesn't know any of this stuff yet. He's still in his early 20s.
Wow, call me out. Thanks.
Well, I'm telling you, because at some point I told you your nose hair is just going to just start growing, and you're going. They have their own nose trimmer, which is also very good. So it's unfortunate that you start to get weird hair in weird places as you get older, but yeah. So that's Manscaped. Do you want to do the call to action?
Yeah, sure. So as Dan mentioned, you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code WCP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code WCP at manscaped.com. Smooth out your fellas with the relaunched Ultra Smooth package from the fellas at Manscaped. Your balls will thank you. And with that, we should get back to the news. Let's talk about OneNote.
Nice segue.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so OneNote has an interesting thing. They did a UWP version years ago, which a lot of people actually really like, and for a long time was getting more features than the Win32 version. And then they kind of reversed course with that. The UWP version stopped getting kind of updates, and the Win32 started getting a focus. What's going on there? Are we going to live in this dual world forever?
Yeah. So the answer to that is no. The plan this year is to unify those apps and just have one. Unfortunately, the UWP one is getting the kick, and the Win32 one is becoming the main singular app for Windows. And earlier this week, or I think maybe it was late last week, they began rolling out the first sort of preview of this new OneNote experience, which is supposed to sort of bring over the best of the OneNote UWP to the Win32 program. You know, I said on this podcast before, the OneNote Win32 app sucks, in my opinion. I know there's a lot of diehard users who prefer it over the UWP one, but I find the UWP app to be way more approachable and just easier to use. It's a much simpler version of OneNote. The Win32 version of OneNote is a much more complicated beast with a sort of more legacy UI, and that's the first thing they're addressing. They're sort of bringing over the OneNote UWP UI to the Win32 client. Not completely. It's not a one-to-one comparison. It's a hybrid of the two. You know, the OneNote UWP app, for example, has, you know, your book, your OneNote, your notebook, and then it has your pages, your categories, and then your pages in like two little sidebars. The Win32 client has a sidebar for your categories, and then your pages appear as tabs along the top. I personally don't prefer that, but that's what the OneNote Win32 app does, and that, as far as I'm aware, is still the case in the new version, but they've updated the UI around it so it looks a little bit more like the UWP version. And they're also making it look more like the Windows 11 sort of experience. It's being consistent with the Windows 11 design, so it has acrylic, or maybe it's Mica blur effects in the sort of header and stuff. It has rounded buttons and rounded corners here and there, and it's looking pretty nice. But that's basically all there is really to say about it for now. Again, this is still in development. It's in the beta channel right now for Office. They're also introducing sort of the UWP Windows Ink Workspace features, so you things like the ruler, the system-wide ruler, which you can use to sort of create straight lines using a Surface Pen, for example. Things like ink to shape, ink to text with font size awareness, page sorting, updates under lock is all available in the OneNote Win32 app as well now. And there's also a new full-screen app, which will make it look a little bit like the Microsoft Whiteboard app, which is kind of nice. But yeah, this is supposed to roll out properly when it's done later this year. It's gone into preview now in the beta channel, and yeah, we'll keep you updated on that, its progress.
Sounds really good. What else we got going on here? Let's see.
Keystone. Talk about Keystone, Xbox. Yeah.
Yeah, this is another interesting story. And so it's for years we've been hearing about like Microsoft doing some kind of Xbox streaming thing. You know, there's Chromecast out there, and of course you have Amazon's, whatever they're calling their stick. I use Chromecast myself. In fact, I've talked about how I basically stopped using my Xbox in lieu of Chromecast because I just find it faster and more efficient. Although it's funny, I did have to turn on my Xbox for the first time in a while last night to watch Top Gun. the original, but I have it in Blu-ray, and I
Nice.
only have. I was like, oh wait, I only have a Blu-ray player in my Xbox, so and I had to turn it on. Of course, it did all the updates. By the way, Blu-ray, as much as the picture looks amazing, holy cow, is it annoying? Like you stick the disc in there, and then it's got to load up, and it takes like 30 seconds to load. And then like comes with this warning screen that plays for 1 minute and 50 seconds, and it's like
Oh.
in foreign languages, and you can't skip it. And it's just like I don't know what it's saying. I think my system's broken. And then eventually it gets to the menu that's got to load. I'm like, oh my god, the whole thing is just loading. So I don't know. I think streaming stuff is just way better. But anyway, we've been hearing about Microsoft doing some kind of streaming stuff for a while, and they've been clearly experimenting with and thinking about different things. And one of these is called Keystone. And what's interesting about it was Ches Corden, our senior games editor, basically heard about this, and he did what he's supposed to do. You reach out to Microsoft, ask for a comment. Now, 9 times out of 10, we do this out of that's what you're supposed to do in journalism, even though you're 99% sure the company is just going to be like, no comment.
Yeah.
And that's fine. We still run the story. We go, we asked Microsoft, they didn't have a comment on it. This case, though, they actually responded. And Zach, I don't have the quotes
I've
up
got it here,
in front
yeah.
of you.
So yeah, they responded and they said, our vision for Xbox Cloud Gaming is unwavering. Our goal is to enable people to play the games they want on the devices they want, anywhere they want. As announced last year, we've been working on a game streaming device codenamed Keystone that could be connected to any TV or monitor without the need for a console. As part of any technical journey, we are constantly evaluating our efforts, reviewing our learnings, and ensuring we are bringing value to our customers. We have made the decision to pivot away from the current iteration of the Keystone device. We will take our learnings and refocus our efforts on a new approach that will allow us to deliver Xbox Cloud Gaming to more players around the world in the future. So this is an interesting statement because, one, it confirms that they were working on a streaming device. Although they did say they announced that last year, I guess I forgot that they did that. They confirmed the code name, which is a very rare thing for Microsoft. You'd never see the Surface team do that, for example. And then they also mentioned that the thing that they have been working on is actually not what they're going to ship, and they have decided to pivot away from that current iteration and take it down another path, which is crazy that they're telling us this. But Microsoft has officially told us that that is what they're doing, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and we're using the phrasing here, device, because it's easy to be like, oh, it's going to be like a stick. And we've seen, sticks before. We're being a little pedantic here, I think, but like we're not necessarily expecting this to be like what Chromecast is, like a little dongle circular thing, or an actual, like a Roku stick. Like it may actually be shaped differently, but now we're kind of,
Yeah.
I don't think the experience is still going to be the same here. I think they should do this, right? I don't know why it's kind of taking so long outside of maybe they're trying to get the correct form factor. Maybe they're, part of the problem, what stinks about these new devices. So these original devices had this kind of like plug and play aspect. You just plug into your HDMI port, dun dun. Now they're starting to all require extra power. So my Chromecast 4K, I plug into the back of the TV. I also got to run a power cord to it, which is like takes away from the elegance and causes problems. I'm pretty sure this will have to do that as well. And so maybe they're thinking around problems around that to make it less dangly on the back of your TV. I always hate in those commercials where they just have a TV on a wall and it's just like mounted and there's no wires. It's like, that must have been fun to set up. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, I guess, the pricing on this, because you could still, don't forget, get older Xboxes for quite affordable prices these days. And if you're just looking for basic streaming, kind of basic features, those Xboxes kind of do that as well. Plus, you can still run physical media on them, or if you get the S series, So I don't know. I think they're trying to. There's also probably concerns now over components, what components they want to use in it. I think my thing I really want to see from it is speed. One thing I kind of hate about all these systems right now, Roku, Chromecast is pretty fast, but it still stutters, Zach. And I know you would hate it. Like sometimes you go to scroll and it's like tick, 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 and it has that little stutter. And the animation is just like a little bit off, and it's just like it's clearly could use a little bit more performance. And I've seen that with the Chromecast. I've seen that with my Xbox Series X. No, not the Series X. Sorry, the Xbox What's it now? S?
Yeah,
What's the
Series
old one?
S. Yeah.
Yeah. No, no, no. Is that the Series X and S? But what's the older one?
Oh, One S and X.
One
Xbox
S.
One
See,
S.
it's been so long, I forgot their names. I don't have the Series X or S, but I will admit the Series X, it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
Actually, when I saw the performance of that, I was like, oh, finally. But that thing's a huge block with its own fan that sits in a corner, right? And costs $500. So I'm really hoping they can kind of figure out the performance, which, let's be honest, has never been Microsoft's forte when it comes to creating operating systems. Maybe Zune was pretty fast. Windows Phone 7 was all right. But they're not known for building like fast, efficient operating systems anymore. So I'm really hoping that experience, if they do that, and I don't know, do you think it'll be like a Chromecast or it'll be just for gaming?
I don't know. I really do not know because it will entirely depend on what OS it's running. If it's running Windows, then yeah, I don't see how it could be a Chromecast competitor because there aren't many Windows apps that will run on UW because they'd have to be UWP, right? There's no way it's running Win32 programs,
Right.
not at this low power. I think if it's going to be a Chromecast competitor, it will have to run Android, which is why maybe they won't go that route. Maybe it will be if it runs Windows, maybe it'll be a sort of direct Google Stadia competitor. What's really nice about Stadia, and I think I've talked about this before, is that at least on my TV, I'm sure they support other TVs, but on the LG CX, I think it is, there's a dedicated Stadia app, and all you do is you connect your controller to your television,
Right.
and then you can just play Stadia just through an app. You don't need any external hardware other than the controller, which is really nice. I would love if Microsoft could do that as well, sort of bypassing the need for hardware. But, as this statement mentions, they say that they're actually pivoting away from the current iteration of the Keystone device, and they want to go down another route. What if they're maybe planning to do a sort of Nintendo Switch-like device where it's a handheld that can dock up to a television and you can play on the big screen powered by the cloud?
That would be amazing.
This is all speculation, right? But I did hear a year ago that Microsoft was looking at the idea of an Xbox handheld powered by the cloud, but it was certainly a separate device from this Keystone thing. There was always a streaming device, a streaming stick, as it was described to me, and a possible handheld device. Though the handheld, as far as I'm aware, was never greenlit. It was just a prototype. Maybe they're deciding to combine those visions, right? Maybe it's both. It's something you can dock up to a television, and it's something you can take with you and stream on the go. Who knows? This is entirely all speculations on my behalf because I don't know anything going on at Xbox really. But yeah, I would prefer that, to be honest with you. I would like to have it's essentially a Switch thing, a cloud Switch powered by Xbox would be really awesome.
So I agree with you 100% on that. Like I would like that device too. That said, those are such radically different price points.
True, good point. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Because when we talk about like a stick or a dongle or something like that, people associate, all right, $99.
99, yeah. Yep.
I think the Google Chromecast is like $79. Mm-hmm. And I got that because it does 4K. I also like the remote and has the Google Voice thing. And Google, I don't love everything about Google, but they got the algorithm stuff done well. When you want to search for a program, and you can do the voice search on it, it works really well for not only finding the program, but then telling you where you can actually watch it. Yeah. And it defaults to whatever system you already have or service you have already installed. And so for me, that experience, and I like their menus and how they recommend stuff. Algorithms get a lot of negative press these days, but man, there's nothing better than turning on your TV and then you have the stuff you've been watching and would you like to continue these last 5 shows? And then based on ratings and stuff like that, here are shows we recommend, and you see stuff starting to pop up actually I do want to watch that. That's available. Neat. It's like Spotify. What makes Spotify so good is the algorithm behind it, saving with TikTok, of course. But so, if they do it a $99 thing, or $79 thing, that's definitely a really interesting device. But what you described is also super fascinating because, we haven't really seen any handhelds that are cloud-based.
Right.
And I've mentioned this previously, and I can't talk too much about it. I've held one. I know of an OEM that made one, and it worked. And it looked like the Steam Deck, just way thinner, and a little bit smaller too. But it had really good ergonomics, really good controls. It ran a version of Android, but then it could do GeForce Now, it can do Stadia, it can do Xbox xCloud. Like it could do, and you would just pick which one you want to do, and you would launch it, and then you would just start playing your game. And they didn't launch it. I'm not even sure it was ever. I don't think it was ever even destined for the U.S. But it had to do with some like weird carrier partner fallout or something like that, where it just didn't go through. But we've never seen that device. We haven't seen Razer, who did actually kind of have a dev device that was announced a while ago, but they haven't released anything. So we don't have anything in this market yet. And maybe it's because it's too early. But the idea of like having a cloud-based little Nintendo Switch that you can sit on your couch and play, and then you're right, you go up to your TV, dock it, and now you can with a controller. But how would they do it, right? Then you need like an external controller.
Yeah, maybe it could come with it. Who knows? You going back to the whole $79 Chromecast thing. The only reason why I think they wouldn't go that route is because I think Microsoft might worry that it comes across as too not gamery. You know, Microsoft was burned quite significantly with going down the entertainment route with Xbox One to the point where they backtracked heavily and have never uttered the word TV since. If they were to come out with a dedicated bit of hardware that's essentially an entertainment streaming stick, that can also do cloud gaming, of course, but it is, a Chromecast competitor rather than a Google Stadia competitor, that may rub gamers, that their core audience, the wrong way if they're still sensitive about that thing. So maybe they're pivoting and doing, my theory is the sort of Nintendo Switch route is because it comes across as more gamery. Yes, it can still do the entertainment stuff, but if you look at it, it looks like a gaming device, and that's what their core audience will love. And how much is the Steam Deck? Is it $400 starting? $399?
I think it's $349, then $449.
Isn't crazy, and you've got to consider that's also with an actual basically computer on the inside. A streaming version of that, which is quite a bit smaller, more like a Nintendo Switch, probably have a low cost process, whatever powers the Nintendo Switch can, but less than that, right? It doesn't even need to be that powerful. I could see them selling something like that for $199 or even $149 if the screen, and because it won't be more than
it's going to come down to the screen and components. Yeah, I think some of the Android One I test, I think they were trying to go for just below $300 for the price on it.
Okay. Yeah, because
and also, so Steam Deck, I was a little off. It's $399, but that's for the 64 gig eMMC version. Sure. Like, wow, no one wants that. So then it goes to $529, and that's the 256 NVMe, which is what I have, and then it's $649 for $512.
Well,
now you can.
Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say you can upgrade the storage yourself. It's tricky, but you can definitely do it yourself. Yeah. So.
Well, you must remember a device that's all cloud won't really need much storage, and I guess maybe the most important thing will be the speed of the storage, just so it can process what you're streaming. So maybe eMMC.
But you're going to still need it. It depends on how good of an experience they want, because it's going to come down to, you want a high resolution display that's really nice, sharp colors, OLED.
Well. It does depend on the size.
And do you want very good audio? Because that's where you're going to spend a lot of the money in is, and then of course Wi-Fi 6 you'll want, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But that's where you're going to start dumping the money in. Because you could make like a Nintendo Switch is quite cheap because the hardware is quite crap. Like, it's cheap plastic.
Yeah.
The display has been loud. The audio is nothing, great. Now the new OLED version's nice, but it took them how many years to get to an affordable OLED that they can kind of ship? So I still think if they did do a handheld like this, even if it's cloud-based, it would still be in that $200 to $300 range. Yeah. I don't think they can go below that, because you're still doing, like, you'll need a processor. It still has to run probably a version of Android would be the cheapest way to go, which is,
so it would have to be cheaper than a Series S, I think, for it to be viable in any way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, all these, like, how you tier this stuff is going to be. Because then people are like, well, I could just buy a whole Xbox for, instead of a handheld, even though they're completely different devices. But and do you start cannibalizing your sales of your other stuff? Like, I don't know. I'm sure a lot of considerations that go into it. But they have a lot of options. I just hope that they start exercising some of them, because luckily no one has released a handheld cloud-based device, but I'm telling you, they're prototyping them. They're out there. They're being worked on. It's just who gets there first and takes the first plunge. It's going to be kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I'm excited for this. No word on when we're expecting this to be officially announced. I think there was one rumor that said it might sort of be announced in September, but as far as we're aware, it could be further out than that. So maybe don't expect it this year. But it's certainly something they're talking about and planning internally. They do seem to want to do a dedicated streaming device of some kind, whether that be a sort of Nintendo Switch thing or a Chromecast thing. Remains to be seen, but it is something they're working on, and it will be coming eventually because Microsoft has confirmed it, weirdly enough.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't know. I think it's going to be really kind of interesting to see how this all progresses going forward. Before we move on to our next story, I just want to quickly mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, your camera this week is a new camera.
It is. It's the same camera you're using, I think, unless you've changed it.
Nope.
It's the Lumina, this thing. And it's really cool, I think.
Yeah, so, for those who maybe missed it, I did a full review of this camera a few weeks ago. And apparently, somehow they decided to send one to Zach and just Corden too,
yes,
which is pretty nice. And so Zach's already using it. I don't know, Zach, you want to share some thoughts about it quickly?
Yeah. So I really like so what you're seeing if you're watching the podcast version right now is what you call the raw feed. There's two feeds that come with this camera that you can configure. There's the raw feed, which is no AI processing. It's just the sensor and whatever Windows is doing with it. And that's what I'm using right now. Then there's the AI feed, which is activated when you install Lumina's custom sort of software. And what that allows you to do is enable things like background blur through Lumina's own software, as well as color correction, all of this other great stuff. I'm currently using the raw feed. I actually prefer the raw feed. I think the raw feed looks really clean, and I don't need to configure the camera much. I think it looks perfectly fine. The AI one is there if you want to use it. My brief testing with it is I wasn't too impressed with the AI technology behind it. I think it could do some work. It just makes, at least in my testing, it made the image look a bit blurry, sort of lower res, and it wasn't very reliable. I found it would cut out sometimes, and I think Dan was using it last week, and you saw his feed would cut out every now and then for whatever reason, likely because the AI is trying to sort of catch up, so it cuts the feed, then it brings it back, or whatever the reason is. But the raw feed, none of that happens. As me and Dan are both. I think you're using the raw feed this week as well, aren't you, Dan? Look us, we look great, and I think it's a really.
You can still. With the terrible, it's not a terrible app. The app is very functional, it's stable, and it works, which is technically a definition of a good app. What makes it not great is it looks exactly like it's a Mac OS app. Like it looks exactly like Mac. And forgive them, they're a company of less than 50 people. They're just started last year. Like I'm going to cut them a little bit slack. If the app was crashing, not stable, or didn't have features, I'd be more mad. But the app, even without the AI stuff, you can still control the tinting and the brightness and the auto white balance and all these. You have like so many sliders, so you can kind of fine tune it to the way you want. So, I'm happy with the app in that sense. But yeah, when you put it in the raw feed, it's a little bit easier to control, which is what you and I are both using at this point. And as far as I know, we're both going to continue using it going forward. We were just talking about this. We're going to start putting our the equipment we use for this podcast in the YouTube description, because we both also use the HyperX Quadcast microphone for this podcast as well. And then I use the GeForce Broadcast app because, or NVIDIA Broadcast, because I'm using the RTX graphics. That's what's blurring my background. Zach can't do that because he still insists on using a Surface Studio.
I can use Skype's built-in version.
It's not nearly as good.
No, I know.
No one touches the NVIDIA Broadcast background blur. Best out there.
I know.
But anyways, if you guys are interested in that camera, we do have the review up. Lumina, Lumina.
That's how you spell Lumina.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, and they have. Everybody was joking about how nice the box is that they ship it in.
It's a really nice box. Yeah.
Yeah, they did a really good experience with it and stuff. So I'm curious about watching the software for this camera, but it is arguably the best webcam we can get right now. It's $199. Only downside. What's the only downside, Zach? Or the major downside?
What is the only downside?
Windows Hello.
Oh yeah, no Windows. See, I haven't noticed because I'm using it on a studio, so Windows Hello still works.
Yeah, so you're lucky there. Yeah, so that's the only downside to it, but we'll forgive them. It's just their first gen device. We'll see what happens there. Anyway, let's move on to
that's why there's no Windows Hello.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of aimed at being for Mac users at first, so that's kind of depressing. But we get what we can do. Anyway, let's move on to another not exciting story. Well, this is it's an important story. So Insider, what was formerly known as Business Insider, ran a story. The author, Ashley Stewart, she made some sources at Microsoft who probably have an axe
Some.
to grind. Yeah, a lot. Um, so what was the sources? Sorry, just take a second. So the source is
sorry, to give context to this. So this is the same author who wrote about the HoloLens in the last few weeks, HoloLens 3, and the sort of
the
rough
chaos that's been happening in there.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, but how their HoloLens 3 got canceled, which was news to us, about why it was canceled and how they're just having problems shipping devices and there's no strategy and they don't know what they're doing with the consumer. Yeah, it's a real, and they actually called it a S show, which is not wrong. For this story, it says, yet interviews with dozens of current and former employees, so dozens, which is quite a lot. And I should point out, the sources are anonymous, but not, and this is always a key point that a lot of people miss. And I understand the confusion because we do this, we have to mention this too. Like when Zach hears something about Surface, he'll write a story. The sources are anonymous to you. And for this story, the sources are anonymous to us. They're not anonymous to the author. And what you do in journalism is someone comes to you and they're like, I'm going to tell you this info, but I don't want to be identified in the article. I would like to be kept anonymous. And the reason people do that should be obvious when it's controversial, or maybe it's something like leaking Surface stuff. You'll get fired, right? So Zach's job and this reporter's job is to verify that the person they're talking to is an actual real person and, matches up with their LinkedIn profile, and they can verify that they actually work for them. On top of that, yeah, you can do stories where you have one single person who you verified and then they're anonymous. You can do that. But most stories you're supposed to corroborate by getting at least a second or a third person to go, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I heard that as well. This, author, she keeps getting dozens of people to confirm this stuff. And like I said, they're not anonymous to her. She knows who they are. They're executives. They're high up people, some of them former, some of them current. And even if you're a former, I understand you don't necessarily want to be known as a whistleblower at your current job, because a lot of these people, like if you're not working on Microsoft, you're probably at Facebook, you're probably at Amazon, you could be at Apple, you could be at Google. And no one wants to be like, oh, you've been ratting out your old employer, So I understand why people want to remain anonymous, especially on sensitive topics. So what are we talking about here? So this article is basically saying that there are still a lot of executives and higher up people at Microsoft who are engaging in basically very poor behavior, specifically verbal abuse and sexual harassment. And they call them the golden boys. And this shouldn't be new to anybody that's been in the tech world for a long time. This has been an ongoing problem that you have sometimes this frat boy association, the original founders, and you hear it in the VC community a lot, and they act with impunity. Maybe they're bringing in millions or billions of dollars even, and they act like they're untouchable. And some of them act like tyrants to their employees, and some of them take advantage of their employees with, or make them very uncomfortable. And yeah, there could be cultural differences and all that, but these people, it's funny because they're smart enough to do this job. They're smart enough to make a ton of money, but just because you do that doesn't mean you're smart enough to actually know what behaviors you should engage in socially, especially at work. And I always find that, we see this a lot with Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk is a very smart dude, clearly a very successful business person. Doesn't mean he's a genius on everything, people. And when it comes to a lot of social things, I think he's out of touch. But anyways, this story is focusing on that in the history sort of at Microsoft. So they talk about Bill Gates, who basically confessed, because he was accused also of having an inappropriate relationship with a staffer. But the big focus of this, I would say, goes back to Alex Kipman, the current head of Microsoft's HoloLens and Metaverse efforts. And he's been there for a long time. And there's just so much in this story. It is behind a paywall. We have access to it, so we're able to quote stuff from it. But, like one story goes back to, I think it was 2016, 2017. They enter a room, a couple executives, a couple other people, females are present, all that. And Kipman tries on a VR helmet and starts playing around, and everybody can see what he's looking at because it's being fed out to a monitor, which is a common scenario, so people can witness what he's seeing. And apparently he gauges in like, let me get the actual quote. Oh, yeah, from the Insider Report. In the video that filled the screen, several young women in skimpy clothing frolicked on a bed. An overtly sexualized pillow fight ensued. An employee who was present, speaking with Insider later, described the scene as VR porn. The assembled staffers exchanged confused glances, and a couple of them walked out. And apparently there were complaints and all that kind of stuff, which is,
it's a weird thing to show
just
colleagues.
Yeah, like I get the humor with VR and doing that, but holy cow, to do that at work in front of like other people, like, I mean, you should be smart enough to know you can't do that. That some people are going to look at that as just not appropriate behavior. But there's a lot more to this too. He was also accused of a culture that diminishes women's contributions. Another instance, apparently another executive witnessed him rubbing an employee's shoulders, and she was uncomfortable, making an uncomfortable face. She tried to shrug him off, and he kept doing it, and no one tried to make him stop, because, and I get it, it's like, well, just make him stop, say no. But if he's a superior and he could just like a $400 million budget or something like that, like these aren't people you just tell off, without having repercussions at your job. And then there was also an accusation that eventually these complaints got so crazy that he had to have chaperones from human resources with him during meetings to basically monitor his behavior. Now, Microsoft denies this, but other people said, no, that was true. We saw that. I could almost kind of see that as being a thing. There was also a report with more than 25 employees contributed to complaining about his inappropriate behavior, although no actions were taken. And there was actually relief within the division, apparently, because of the pandemic, which is sad to say, because it meant no one had to actually work with him face to face and interact with him.
Wow.
Yeah, which when you combine these things with what's going on in HoloLens, it's like, and I've met Alex Kidman. He's a very nice gentleman. Had a very good conversation with him. He's clearly very smart, and very talented, but just because you're very smart and talented, like I said, doesn't mean you're very good at these social situations, management, or these other things. And apparently it's just an ongoing problem, and there's been complaints, all that kind of stuff. So there's all that. And it gets into sort of the culture, how Satya Nadella, who himself had a gaffe a couple of years ago, I think it was 2014, he was being interviewed on stage, asked about women's pay and equality, and he basically said, just go to your boss and you should be able to ask for more money, and that should be the end of it. If you're worth it, you'll get it. And it came off just a little bit tone deaf the way he said it. And he later kind of walked it back and apologized, and he put it into his book explaining what there. And he said he learned from it, all that kind of stuff, which is all good. But apparently the woman that asked him that question was on Microsoft's board, was later asked to resign because she basically embarrassed him publicly.
Oh, no. See, yeah, but that's the perfect example of why women don't speak out on certain issues, is because they get, in trouble and fired, essentially. It's terrible.
Yeah. And she said this. She said this publicly into this story. She's like, yeah, I felt I was being singled out for what I did. And she eventually did leave the board like a year later. But there was a person who came out and, said like, and basically Nadella didn't do anything. Like he never stepped in and said, hey, whoa, that's not appropriate. We can't do that. And so, and then it goes on to some other people. There was King, I think his name is. Tom Keene, a corporate vice president of the company's Azure cloud computing business. Now, he's not accused of sexual impropriety. What's that word? Well, anyway, he's accused of just basically being a tyrant. They called him King Tom behind his back. He would berate people publicly in meetings, made a woman cry in the middle of a meeting, and was just known as like, you were at his beck and call, they said. And he was just a really nasty kind of person to work with. And he got eventually shifted out of that position, but he's still there and he still oversees hundreds of employees, apparently. The more interesting one was Terry Myerson. So
Right.
Terry Myerson, again, I've met him, had some good conversations with him. Very nice gentleman. He oversaw Windows, and specifically Windows 10 era. Came out of the Windows Phone division, worked very closely with Joe Belfiore. We've seen him on stage for many years, both with Windows Phone and Windows 10. And then he suddenly departed in 2018. It was a weird thing. It just kind of came out of nowhere, like, all right, I'm leaving the company. And he was there for over 20 years, I believe. And the company put a positive spin on it. I had a closing interview with him. That was me, Tom Warren, and a few other people who got to interview him. And learn about everything. But like there was never a reason given. Oh, I'm going to go try new things. And he did. He went to go form a new company, and he's doing quite well. Microsoft actually invested in that company. It focuses on health and data and everything, which is just a smart area to go into. But we never knew why. Like suddenly he left. And was it Windows Phone was failing at the time? Was it Windows 10, which was also having some issues and wasn't going as quickly as I think people wanted it. And we just never knew. Now it's come out that, I think I've heard about this before, that there was at an event in 2018, he basically had a meltdown and just behind stage was just screaming at people, yelling at them, berating his employees. And it was just really inappropriate. And it was so bad that Nadella did step in, and three executives, there are three people with knowledge of the issue claim that his behavior played a significant role in his departure. And that's really interesting because that's something we didn't know up until this point of why Terry Myerson suddenly left Microsoft. And so, maybe that's the case there. Now, Nadella did step in there and, shuffle him out, which I guess is a good thing. But I guess that kind of is the point, that it takes something very public almost for it to happen before Nadella steps in and does something, because he's painted as someone who doesn't want to hear about this stuff, doesn't want conflict. And I get it. He's kind of the CEO. He's like, I think he wants the other executives to take care of these problems, however they can, shuffle people around, settle things, but he doesn't want to have to step in and deal with it. But maybe that doesn't always happen, which is maybe the case here at Myerson. And then the article closes out with talking about Blizzard, Activision Blizzard, which is its own whole can, because the Kodak, the CEO there, has been accused of a ton of stuff and is a real nasty individual, and how Microsoft is going to rectify that. And so I guess the big issue here is that Microsoft presents itself in a very public fashion as promoting equality and being sensitive to, other groups of people who work there. We've obviously focused a lot on people with disabilities lately. And that's their public position. They've been very aggressive about that. Amazon doesn't do this. Google doesn't do this. Apple doesn't do this. They're not as open about trying to convert the culture within their companies. And to his credit, I'm not trying to throw Nadella completely on the bus. There's been a lot of changes at Microsoft for the better. People generally do feel better. You and I both talked to a lot of employees, and almost all of them I talked to are very happy working there. And there's independent studies done with employee satisfaction, and they're very happy. But clearly, there are people who are still kind of untouchable in the company, that are so high up, that make money, that are so valuable, that their behavior is, kind of swept under the table. Now, this reporter, she did contact Kipman, asked for a statement. He didn't give her one, and Microsoft either denied or had no comment on a lot of this stuff. I will say, this is a tough story to do, because if you're wrong, right, you can't just go accuse people of all these kind of things and make it up, because then you're open to libel. And if you don't see Microsoft suddenly sue Insider, or Kipman suddenly sue her, there's truth to this, right? Because if this stuff is just out of left field, that's never happened. No one, Kipman has a clean record. There's no settlements or anything like that with employees. If that's the case, then Microsoft could just go to court and be like, listen, they're defaming us and saying these things that are just completely fabricated. I will bet you don't see that lawsuit. You don't see anything about that. I'll be real curious to see how Microsoft addresses this going forward, because this is just getting too much stuff coming at Kipman at this point, where it's like they're going to have to. I don't think they'll fire him. I think they'll shuffle him off to research, where he won't oversee employees directly, which maybe which may be fine. I mean, like I said, he's a smart dude. He's clearly valuable, but he shouldn't necessarily. Sounds like he shouldn't be around other female employees.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And, you know, I do wonder how much he will affect the HoloLens business just being part of that division, right? Like, you know, if partners looking to, you know, to make deals with Microsoft and they've seen this news about Alex Kipman and he's the guy sort of leading the project, it kind of stains it a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Especially if this comes out to be true. So yeah, who knows what they'll do with him. The Terry Myerson one's interesting because, you know, I think, you know, I feel like Steve Jobs is famous for having that sort of
Right.
personality. There are many stories about Steve Jobs berating employees, shouting at them, making them cry in meetings, in elevators, just around the office, really. But I don't think. But you've got to remember that was Steve Jobs back in the day, you know, 2010 or earlier.
He's also the CEO.
Yeah, right. He created the company. He's a visionary. He's passionate about it. Terry Myerson is just an employee of a massive company. And sure, don't get me wrong, he can still feel passionate about the thing that he works on and stuff. But especially in 2017, 2018, times have changed in the workplace significantly from the early 2000s to now. There's no real room to be able to be like, you shouldn't be making other employees or even, you know, people who work for you, you shouldn't be making them cry. You shouldn't be making them feel unwelcome or stupid or whatever it is they may be. You have to go about these issues, I guess, or concerns in a professional manner. You have to sit them down, talk to them, be like, listen, I get where you're coming from. This isn't going to work for us, but you be a little bit more respectable about it. You know, you can still fire people for doing wrong things, and if they are doing something that's a fireable offense, then maybe raising your voice is warranted. But the Terry Myerson situation does sound like it was him going off for reasons that, sure, may have been a little bit stressful and annoying to him at the time, but probably didn't warrant berating all the people that were there behind stage. It's like, sure, things happen, problems arise, it's fine, we'll have to work through it and get over it. And I guess he just didn't handle that very well, assuming that story is correct as well.
Yeah, and I mean, she got three people to say, yep, you know, that his behavior was at least quote unquote contributed to his departure. So maybe it wasn't the sole reason, but it was maybe, you know, so maybe the performance in the Windows division was also part of it. There could have been multiple factors, but clearly his behavior. And I think this thing about, like, you know, people have been in the company for so long that they're kind of untouchable is a total fact. I think anyone who works for a large company knows this. Someone came forward to me from Amazon and said, yeah, same thing. There are people who will try to destroy you if you're too smart, if you ask too many questions, if you try to stick out. They'll try to destroy you, get you pushed out. Now, that's not the same allegations as sexual harassment or necessarily making people cry. And it's not like Amazon is out there trying to be like, oh, we're a huge role model. We're going to focus completely on equality. Like, they're not doing the same positioning as Microsoft. But it goes to show you that you get into these companies where you're talking hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. There are egos. There's a lot of stress. Like, I mean, part of me gets it, right? Like, you know, being in charge of an entire division at some point, you know, we talk about there's an imposter syndrome people talk about all the time these days. Like, there's a lot goes on in someone's head, but that doesn't excuse, you know, real leadership is not screaming at people.
Right.
You can definitely, as you said, be passionate. You could be upset. You could be mad, but, you know, screaming at someone like they're a child.
Right.
That's not leadership, in my opinion. That's just like someone losing control. That's someone who's not in control of their own emotions and can't have a rational discussion. And I don't look at that as a strength. When I see someone lose their temper, I'm like, you're weak. Like, that's your weakness.
Yeah.
You just can't control yourself. When something pushes your buttons the wrong way, you just go into a rage. And you're going to end up doing or saying something you're going to regret later. And so to me, that's a huge weakness. You rarely see me, and anyone knows me in real life, lose my temper like that. I just don't, because, like, I'm more of a Spock from Star Trek. I just look at the world in a very logical way. And these people clearly don't do that.
Yeah, it's the difference between people who are level-headed and people who just can't control their emotions and control themselves, really. You know, I've always been of the mindset that if I'm in a situation where me screaming at somebody would be air quotes warranted, then I've just made mistakes in being involved in this situation with these people to begin with. It's something that's now out of my control. What's screaming going to do about it? To fix it? It's not. It's just going to make everybody feel worse. including yourself. And it's just like, there's no point going down that route. We might as well, carry this out in a calm and content manner. And honestly, I feel like if you sit somebody down and just like, I'm just so disappointed in you, that is way more effective than screaming at somebody.
My professor in grad school, Dr. Lorraine Obler, she was like that. She would never yell, but holy cow, she could just chop you down without yelling, and just you'd get the point, and you'd feel really bad, and you'd get that like, oh geez. And that's way more effective, I think, than just being yelled at. Mm-hmm. Because being yelled at just makes you like, why am I working here? Why am I going through this?
I don't need this.
This isn't inspiring. Because you should be able to look up to the person who's your boss and be inspired by them. You should be like, I want to be like that person. I want to be like their leadership. You shouldn't be like, I can't wait till that person dies in a car crash so I can take their position. Like, that's the way you should be. You should be idolizing the people, or not even idolizing, but at least looking up to the people who are your superiors as role models. And if you can't do that, and you're looking at them like, being critical, that says something. And, the stuff with the, Kitman's from, I believe he's from Brazil, and I get it. Brazil's a very different culture, a lot more machismo, and it's a lot more like, I don't want to completely stereotype, I'm just going to say it's a different culture than America, which is partially probably to explain his behavior. Of course, it doesn't excuse his behavior, because he should be smart enough to know, like, you don't do this stuff at work. Like, and I think what people did in the 2000s and 1990s and 80s is very different. Stuff was way more lax back then, and you could get away with that stuff, but you just can't anymore. It's not like Microsoft employees are just like oblivious. You go through training. You and I work for a company where every couple months they're like, you got to watch these videos on how to do things. And a lot of it is on, this kind of subject material. So I don't know. It's very interesting. She needs to continue doing this work. I hope she does. I guarantee you there's probably other people at Microsoft who have the same accusations that are floating around that we'll probably hear about. And this isn't just a Microsoft problem. We're signaling them out, but that's who we cover. But I guarantee you every tech company has stories like this.
I'm pretty sure I've seen headlines involving Amazon executives, and I'm sure I've seen Google ones as well. I mean, the guy who created Android famously was
good
forced out of the company because of similar behavioral issues. So
I don't want to necessarily say, can I use creep? Because he can't. Some of the description of the stuff, he seems he has a predilection for sexual things that are just different, I suppose. But this stuff is, I don't know. I'm always amazed that people are kind of self-destructive. Like, if Alex Gibson is leaving Microsoft, I'm going to go on to new adventures now and all this, it's going to be big headline news, and we're all going to be like, oh, we know why. Yeah. But it's going to be a shame, because we know it's also going to be self-inflicted. Yep. And that's a terrible reason to have someone's career kind of, chipped or end or something.
I guess the silver lining to this is we are at a point these days where these conversations are being had, and we are pointing out people for this bad behavior. As you mentioned, working at big companies like this 10, 20 years ago is a different time, a lot of people got away with a lot of stuff back then. But these days, you can't get away with that stuff. People will call you out, and you will be, hopefully, reprimanded for your bad behavior. And that should be the way it goes. You should you should carry a professional stance. You should be professional in a professional environment. And it's good that these conversations are had, and this sort of whistleblowing or pointing people out when they do something wrong is happening, because not only because people learn from their mistakes, right? Hopefully Alex Kipman will learn from this and will be a better person as a result. So
yeah, I think that's part of the problem. At least the article was spelling out was like, people would make complaints, and the investigations drag on. They said sometimes for years with no obvious consequences, and that that's the other problem, the speed of it. If 25 employees are writing like a letter complaining about someone's behavior, and like no immediate action is taken, that's like demoralizing. And it's just like,
I wouldn't want to work there anymore.
And it's just like, and a lot of people left HoloLens. Like, that was a part of the earlier stories, that a lot of people have left the project. some of it was because of mismanagement. They were working on things they didn't want to anymore. But I wouldn't be surprised if some of it's related to this as well, just not a conducive environment. So they got to do something. Hopefully, it's a shame when you hear about this happening with people, especially people you admire or look up to. That's the other, thing. It's like, I'm sure people work with Kipman and they first started to, and they're like, this guy's awesome. Like, Jesus, he's a genius. He's doing all this amazing things. And it's just like, and then you learn he's kind of a creep and not great to work for. Like that just, never idolize your heroes, they say, or never meet your heroes. And it's just like, that's a shame to have that happen. So for people who are still working there and who came forward, absolutely props to them. And it's a shame they have to do it anonymously. I hope that changes in the future and they can get more justice at their work. But hopefully Nadella steps in here and takes some action, because I don't think these kind of news stories can keep happening. But anywho, I guess on that note, we'll round out the podcast here. We could do a thing of the week. Zach, what's your thing of the week?
Yeah, very quick, because we're almost at 2 hours. I can't believe it. This has been a really long podcast. Thing of the week for me is the Obi-Wan Kenobi show on Disney+. The first 2 episodes are out now. No spoilers, but it is amazing. The thing that I've taken away from the first episodes is, we've seen other Star Wars shows on Disney Plus. We have Boba Fett and The Mandalorian. You sit down and you watch those, and they feel like TV shows. That they're built, they're scripted, they're designed to be TV shows. I read in an interview that a while back now that the Obi-Wan Kenobi show was originally conceptualized to be a movie, and sitting down and watching the first episodes, it just feels like a movie. It's paced like a movie. It comes across. It looks like a movie. The visually, I think it's the best looking Disney Plus show that they've ever put out. Probably because it had the budget for a movie, I think. And it looks really great. So far, the first episode set things up. They introduced all the characters, blah blah blah. Again, no spoilers. But where episode 2 ends, amazing, and it's now left me very excited for the next week's episode, and I can't wait to see where they take this.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet. I'm gonna probably do that tonight. But that and the Andor trailer dropped. Andor sounds like Andor, which, if you don't know, is a prequel to Rogue One of the best Star Wars movies ever made. And that trailer looks ridiculously good. And actually looks really good because someone pointed out to me on Twitter, it doesn't have a desert in it. So, it's like the first Star Wars we've seen that's not on Tatooine. Yeah. But if you haven't seen that, go watch it, because I think that's going to be a really good series. I was a huge fan of Rogue One, and Andor, I think, is like a really cool character. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I'll share my thoughts, I guess, next week on Obi-Wan. But yeah, I don't really have a thing of the week. I'm trying to think what I did this week outside of, I did see The Northman. That was a movie. It's not bad. I'm not slamming it. It was very well done. It was very well acted. It was an interesting story. It was brutal. It was aggressive, and it was nonstop. That for like what felt like, I think it was over 2 hours long. It felt a little too long. Like maybe, I think it was 2.5 hours. I think they could have cut a half hour, but it's a kind of movie you watch. You're like, all right, I never need to see that again. But I enjoyed it. It was a brutal movie. And I was joking with my best friend. I was like, I also just watched a 3-hour documentary on Stalin. Oh. Which, if you really want to get depressed, yeah, I started using CuriosityStream, which has just a bunch of documentaries. And there's a series that came out years ago called Apocalypse. They did Apocalypse World War I, and they recolorized all this footage from World War I and stabilized it, cleaned it up. And then they narrate and explained all the major battles of World War I. It's fascinating because I never saw like World War I like this. And so they did the same thing here it's called Apocalypse Stalin. They found all this footage of Stalin, colorized it, and stabilized it. And it's just weird seeing like all that, like in video footage. And between that and this Northman, I was just like really bummed out on humanity. So it's been one of those weeks. I was like, joke, I need to watch Pixar films or something like that for a couple of days, but we'll see what happens. I will say for next week, there is a holiday on Monday, so it'll be slow then. But there is a lot of news coming out over the next. The next week is going to be interesting. A lot of announcements coming for laptops, PCs, accessories, and all that. I have a new pair of headphones, which I'll be talking about next week, which are really, really good. Bunch of stuff coming out, though, nonstop. So tune in for that. I forgot to even cover reviews this week. We did do, I should do. I don't know if we have
We're
time to do
running out
that.
of time, Daniel.
I know. I'll remind me next week to catch up on reviews because we did a lot of, especially Rich Edmonds did a bunch of reviews for desktop PC cases as well as other things and accessories we have done. So that's it. We're going to do Q&A with the audience now. So if you're listening to us live, you can jump in and start asking us questions. Otherwise, follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, and follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. You can ask us questions there. Don't forget to do your Manscaped. That's the WPC discount code for 20% off. We'd really appreciate it. We rarely try to get sponsorship on this podcast, but it does help where it can. So as always, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Have a good weekend. Take care, everyone.
Wow, it wasn't an hour, 2 hours.
No, it was an hour and 37 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, that's really weird. The Sound Recorder app had 2 hours on the counter.
I was wondering, I was like, where do you get 2 hours from?
Yeah, that's really weird. I was looking at the time, I was like, we haven't been here for 2 hours. We could have talked about the reviews then. Sorry. I don't know what. The sound call was like, listen, you've just hit 2 hours. I was like, oh my God. That was weird.
How dare you rush me?
I know, sorry. Any questions? We are going to hang around and answer them if you have them. If you don't have them, we won't hang around. Simple as that. That's how it works. Oh, that reminds me. Are we able to do the podcast on Thursday next week instead of Friday? Or are you busy on Thursday?
Let me check my calendar real quickly. I think it probably should be fine.
Yeah, because I'm probably not going to be around on Friday next week or the Friday after because I am on vacation at that point.
I got all just meetings Thursday morning. And then, we could do the podcast then. It's
cool,
fine.
yeah. So next week's episode will be on Thursday. And then the week after, we won't do one because I'm not around that week. So Dan and Zach, good podcast. Appreciate the news and discussion. And of course, the Manscaped pitch needed that laugh. Thank you very much. Any thoughts on the leaked info on 2023, 2024 Xbox and PlayStation consoles? I mean, no, we don't really, other than the fact that they exist and will have a slightly newer architecture on the inside, we don't really know anything about them. I would hope that the Series X refresh doesn't have a disk drive, because I have an X Series X and I've never used its disk drive, so I'd like to save a few pennies there, if possible.
Yeah, that's the challenge right now. If you want the one without the disk drive, it's like, cool, oh, it's not as powerful.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly. Do you know what Count and Edinburgh? Or Edinburgh. No, I do not. I believe they're Xbox code names. Edinburgh's definitely an Xbox code name. I don't know what Count is.
Brian saw an early release of Top Gun Maverick. Lucky. I'm going to try to see that this weekend at some point, but it's like 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's ridiculous. Like, people are like, I didn't even like the first Top Gun, but this one's, it's 97% Rotten Tomatoes. It's just, it's unbelievable to a sequel 36 years later, I think it is, and have it that good. Like,
Hello, do you know if the Surface Go will have an ARM chipset? The next Surface Go will probably have an ARM chipset in it, but we won't be seeing that till next year, so... I thought the search bar widget thing was only for Windows 11. It showed up on my Windows 10, though, question mark. Did it really? I did not know that was possible. If it did, send a screenshot. I'd like to see that. Is Satya and Microsoft stuck with Kitman in the idea that he's too difficult to replace?
I mean, that definitely plays a part into it, right? I mean, there's this whole, that's the idea of being untouchable. It's like, you're just too valuable to the company. Yeah. Either you're too smart or, that's the problem. So that's why they're probably trying to, assuming all this stuff is true, why they want to keep him. I'm sure he would be difficult to replace. Moreover, we don't know if Amazon, Google, Facebook, especially Facebook, will probably be like, oh, you have trouble and behavior issues at Microsoft and accused of things, that's fine. We'll still hire you. And then,
Yeah.
Facebook just gets Kitman and, everything there. So yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, they don't want to have to get rid of them. Don't get me wrong. It's funny because if you just start off at Microsoft, you could just be like, they'll fire you in a second. They don't care because you have no equity in the company. But someone like Kitman and these higher up people have a lot of equity, right? And that's the problem, is that they're too high up to reprimand. And I think they're in a pickle. They would rather him just stop and this stuff kind of go away. And unfortunately, it looks like it's not, which is why these people are coming forward, right? So,
Will the micro SD card slot return on Surface Pro 9? I'm pretty sure the answer to that is no, sadly.
yeah, no.
Any idea how the Internet Explorer end of support will work in terms of consumer and business versions of Windows 10? Will we get an update that removes Internet Explorer, and can we prevent it? I have no idea. I assume there will be an update that removes Internet Explorer, because I think isn't the plan to move everybody into Edge, because Edge has an Internet Explorer mode. I don't know. I'm just talking off the top of my head here. So yeah, I have no idea, unfortunately. Right, any more questions? If not, we will say farewell until next Thursday.
Hopefully there's some anti-competitor thing in Kitman's contract. I think that would only apply if you quit. I'm not sure if that applies if you're fired, Tim, but I have no idea on that stuff. Yeah, it's a good question. Zach's disappeared.
I'm here.
All right, I think that's good.
Hang on, there's a couple there. Is Microsoft or Amazon planning their own ARM system on a chip? Qualcomm seems to have stagnated while the M1 is running circles around them. It's always a question if Microsoft is building its own system on a chip. They've certainly researched and prototyped chips, and there have been rumors every now and then that yes, they want to make their own chips. However, it's a business that Microsoft really doesn't need to get into. It would just anger its partners, Intel, AMD, and Qualcomm. And it's just, I don't know, is there really any, unless Microsoft can pump out a chip that's better than everything else in the market, what is the point? Why not rather invest their time in building other chips that you can hand off features of functionality to, such as, neural processing unit, or, the inking processor they've got in the Surface Pros, which is supposed to handle or make inking better or something. Stuff like that. I think is probably more their avenue than dedicated actual system on the chips. But who knows? I've not heard anything specific. I think their partnership with Qualcomm, where they get to rebrand a Snapdragon chip as a Microsoft SQ1 or 2 or 3 or 4, is probably good enough for them at this point. And I think it's good enough for the end user as well.
What earbuds am I using? These are the Lenovo earbuds. What's the actual name? Let's see. I've talked about them on previous podcasts. They're really nice. They're called Lenovo True Wireless Earbuds. They go for, I believe, $99. No, sorry, that's not what they are. What are they called? Now I got to find this before I end. I don't want to leave. This is so annoying. Let's see. I know we have it on Windows Central. They're called Lenovo Smart Wireless Earbuds. They have noise cancellation. They are water resistant, and the real benefit is they can connect up to 2 devices simultaneously via Bluetooth, and they're $99. And I like them. They're really good.
There you are. And with that, I think it's time to say goodbye. So thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time.